Sean Hannity Show. The radicals have taken over. Hold on to your wallets. Your taxes are ready to go sky high. It's time to stand up for our military.
Did you hear me, O'Shaughnessy?
How the hell is Sean Hannity shaping media direction?
I'll put Mr. Burgess up against Sean Hannity. They'll tear him up.
The Sean Hannity Show starts right here, right now.
All right, here we are, Conservative Underground, Conservatism in Exile, Sean Hannity Show. All right, so now we are getting lectured by the French. We are begging the Chinese to buy our bonds. We are leaving conservatism here in America, conservative capitalist principles, and moving towards socialism in the single largest transfer of the economy from the public sector to the government, or from the private sector to the government. I stand corrected. Now, there is a speech that has gotten so much notice, and we're very pleased, proud, and honored to be able to play it for you, as it comes to us from a member of the European Parliament, Daniel Hannan. Listen to this.
Prime Minister, I see you've already mastered the essential craft of the European politician, namely the ability to say one thing in this chamber and a very different thing to your home electorate. The truth, Prime Minister, is that you have run out of our money. Every British child is born owing around £20,000. Servicing the interest on that debt is going to cost more than educating the child. As a consequence, under your captaincy, our hull is pressed deep into the waterline under the accumulated weight of your debt. You cannot carry on forever squeezing the productive bit of the economy in order to fund an unprecedented engorgement of the unproductive bit. You cannot spend your way out of recession or borrow your way out of debt. And when you repeat in that wooden and perfunctory way that our situation is better than others, that we're well placed to weather the storm, I have to tell you, you sound like a Brezhnev-era apparatchik giving the party line. You know, and we know, and you know that we know that it's nonsense.
And joining us on our newsmaker line right now is the member of the European Parliament that made that speech. Daniel Hannan is with us. Sir, welcome aboard. Thank you for being with us.
It's a real pleasure to be on your show, Sean. I'm a big fan.
Well, my staff told me that you knew about this program, and I was just a little bit curious as to, did you listen to the radio show or know about it, or did you watch TV on Fox News? I was curious how you knew about me.
Yeah, there's only a very small number of really good conservatives who you can rely on, and, we recognize each other by these secret signals, and you're better known than you might realize outside the U.S.
Well, I'm very honored to have you, and I've got to tell you something. You certainly deserve a career in radio or television, because when you said, I have to tell you that you sound like a Brezhnev-era apparatchik giving the party line, I wanted to fall over in my chair, but more importantly, to everything you said, I said amen. And I see the similarities in what you are describing in your speech to the situation happening here in America, and it's frightening to me. And I'd like you to just expand on why you decided to give that speech that way.
When the bailouts happened, when the crisis came, it took a lot of people a bit by surprise, and very quickly a consensus emerged that the answer was lots of public spending, bailouts, nationalization, subsidies, rescuing the banks, right? And inside the Beltway, or as we say on our side of the Atlantic, in the Westminster Village, there was an almost immediate rush to judgment by the commentators, by the pundits, by the politicians that something had to be done. But outside was the kind of 80% of the country who was being expected to foot the bills for all this, who was saying, well, hang on, wait a minute, nobody asked us about this. Nobody consulted us about running these huge deficits. Nobody asked our permission for loading this level of debt onto our children, our grandchildren. And nobody had the courtesy to come and say, listen, do you mind if we take all this money from you in tax and then give it to banks so they can loan it back to you at interest? And that was never said. There was nobody, or very few people to articulate that message. So I figured, okay, under the conventions of the European Parliament, this guy had to sit here for 3 minutes. Right, for once he's going to have to listen. I'm going to tell him the kind of things the people in my constituency are telling me all the time.
You know, I've got to tell you something. There's a phrase that John McCain has been using, and he says it's generational theft, and I think you very articulately expressed it in a similar fashion, that we are robbing from our children and grandchildren, and we are spending money at a rate that is just not sustainable.
Yeah. From our children yet unborn and unbegotten, our national poet says.
Yes.
Absolutely right. And it's monstrous. I mean, the figure I gave that, every kid owes £20,000, every newborn baby in our country. I mean, more if you count the guarantees to the banks, which they may or may not get back. Repaying that plus interest is going to cost more than educating the child. Now, what kind of mad political system leads you to think that if you are in debt, the answer is to spend more and borrow more? There are going to be guys listening to this show who know people who are in debt. They've taken out too many credit cards and they're overdrawn on them. And you would say to that person, okay, try and cut your spending, try and live within your budget. But when it's the government, you say, no, there's an even better idea. We just spend even more and the problem will look after itself.
I got to tell you, it is the exact same debate we're having in here, and I don't know to what extent you're actually following the numbers in America, but with Barack Obama's spending, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that we're basically taking on $1 trillion debt a year. And when we add up these numbers, it is, if we look at all 43 presidents prior to Barack Obama, George Washington to George W. Bush, that is more debt, more deficit spending than all of those presidents combined. And by the year 2019, we will be paying nearly $900 billion a year just on interest on the debt that we are now accumulating, not including any future debt.
I mean, it's just really scary. But, with all of that, I would rather have your problems than mine. And I'll tell you why. You've got one thing really going for you in your system, which is that at least the guys who decided on that were the elected representatives. It went through Congress, it was poured at and argued over, and every dot and comma of the stimulus package was voted on by the representatives of the guys who are going to have to pay for the whole thing, right, the taxpayers. Now, in our country, and this is almost, I'm ashamed to have to say this, in our country, the Prime Minister just decreed the bailouts, decreed the stimulus packages, not only without having to get it voted for, but without even calling Parliament, without even debating it. Now, we went through a civil war in our country to establish the principle that only the House of Commons should have the right to raise legitimate revenue through taxation. And here we are now tolerating this executive power of a level that the Stuart Kings would have loved,
Hey, I got to tell you, we're not really far behind you. There's actually the Obama administration and the Democrats are now actually talking about in a really serious fashion the idea that they would use the process known as reconciliation, where they would bypass the traditional historical process of, for example, getting cloture in the United States Senate and passing bills in the traditional sense when it comes to nationalizing health care, when it comes to cap and trade, which would cost about $2,000 a year in a general tax for environmental science that I believe is phony and doesn't exist. So we may not be far behind you.